Dear Labour MPs, it's time to get rid of Keir Starmer as leader, and you know it. You came into politics to make a difference. You joined Labour because you hate poverty and inequality. You didn't come into politics to be a warm-up act for a Farage government, and on our current path, that's all you'll be remembered for. You've seen the latest polling showing that Reform, with just 26% of the vote, would be the largest party in Parliament if there was an election today. That means most of you would be out of a job, Nigel Farage would be our Prime Minister in a coalition with the Tories, despite their parties only getting a combined 44% of the vote. I don't want that to happen, you don't want that to happen, and there are only two ways of preventing that from happening. Either Labour significantly improves living standards at a rate that's fast enough for people to notice and thank them for it, and the other way is to change the voting system to one where all votes count equally. And given that in almost every single election, parties to the left of the Conservatives, so Labour, Lib Dems, SNP, Greens, get a majority of the vote, it would prevent Nigel Farage getting into government on just the 26% vote share. And a poll came out last week showing that support for a proportional voting system has hit record levels, with 60% of Brits wanting it. Never mind the fact that Labour members have already voted for that in conference, so you would have the support of your party. Hell, you'd have the support of Green voters who would vote Labour if that was their policy, as a way of helping their party in the long run. Now, ideally, you'd do both, address the cost of living crisis and change the voting system. But Keir Starmer has been tying your hands on both since the moment you took office.
Look, proportional representation is not our policy. We won't be making time for it.
Because did you want to take winter fuel payments away from pensioners? Did you want to cut welfare support for people with disabilities, which your own OBR says would push 250,000 people into poverty? You know that the record levels of poverty in the UK isn't because the UK is a poor country, it's because the UK is one of the most financially unequal countries in the economically advanced world. But will Keir Starmer let you impose a wealth tax? No. Will he let you raise corporation tax? No. Will he let you raise income tax on the top 10%? No. The political strategy that got you elected by appealing to the middle?
On climate change, growth, aspiration, levelling up, Brexit, economic responsibility. We are the party of the centre ground.
Isn't the kind of politics that changes people's lives fast enough for them to notice. And forget being in the EU officially. The single market, so the system that other non-EU countries like Norway benefit from. You can see what not being in that is doing to the cost of living crisis. Because you, sitting there watching this, you are not an economist. But you're a politician in the party of government relying on the economists in the civil service to tell you what's good for people. Well, the Office of Budget Responsibility says that Brexit is costing our economy about £100 billion a year.
So far, the data that we've seen on the impact of Brexit, especially taking into account the fact that the new trading arrangements came in January, is broadly consistent with that assumption that we had, which is that it would reduce our long-run GDP by around 4%. In the long term, it is the case that Brexit has a bigger impact than the pandemic.
The Bank of England, who you rely on to tackle inflation and therefore the literal cost of living, says that Brexit is making inflation worse.
The simple way of thinking about what Brexit's done to the economy is that in the period that happened after the referendum, there was the biggest depreciation that any of the world's four major economies have seen overnight, that contributed to increasing prices, reduced wages.
They also say that Brexit is taking £1,000 from the average household. And yet, of course, Starmer's Brexit reset is a step in the right direction, but you know it doesn't even touch what rejoining the EU single market would do for people. But he's ruling that out because he's scared of what Farage and the Daily Mail would say about him. And so he's tying your hands, preventing you from doing what you know you need to do to improve people's quality of life, but it is going to be your failure to improve people's quality of life that people will be throwing back in your faces when you're campaigning on the doorsteps next election. And ironically, those same people will then vote for Nigel Farage. So Starmer's fear of Nigel Farage is exactly what's going to help make Nigel Farage our Prime Minister. His cowardice is putting you out of a job. Now yes, he may have softened a bit on the welfare cuts, but that's because he knew a rebellion was coming. He was scared. But do you think that inspires anyone? Seeing him constantly U-turn? Seeing him not able to control his own party? Starmer's personal polling is tanking at an insane rate, and your reputation is tied to his. Because he might be the one stealing immigration quotes from Enoch Powell, talking about an island of strangers, sending young previously Labour voters running towards the Greens, while at the same time not doing nearly enough to keep older voters from turning towards Reform. But you're going down with him. You watched what happened with the Democrats and Biden and Harris. They didn't do enough to aggressively tackle the cost of living crisis because America is just too capitalist for that. They weren't nearly progressive enough for their younger voters who weren't particularly fans of their support for a genocide. And Kamala Harris bragging about her Glock wasn't nearly Republican enough for the MAGA crowd. And you are following the exact same doom spiral. So kick Keir out. Take a proper sledgehammer to poverty and inequality while giving hard Brexit a thumping 2 to restore some market confidence. Give us a voting system where all votes count equally, and maybe you'll keep your jobs, and I won't have to worry about being governed by a party that defended the people who tried to lynch ethnic minorities last year. This has been F Politics. Have a great week.